Hello, hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. This episode is brought to you by Brain FM, and it is another chapter in Speak From Within, my book on how to engage, inspire, and motivate any audience, particularly if you have a fear of public speaking. I used to have one. I overcame it, and this book details how you can do that too. If you want to try out Brain FM, which I adore because I use it every time, every day, to sleep, to wake up, to recharge, to create, to do deep work, whatever it is I'm doing, I usually have my earbuds in and I'm listening to Brain FM as I work. Head over to brain.fm/innovative mindset to get 20% off the app, my little gift to you. And as an affiliate, of course, I'll get a little bit of a chunk of change if you decide to do that. If not, just try it out and see what you like about it or don't like about it. I love it. You can try it out for free, I think, for a few days, and it's fabulous. I think you'll love it. It's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about Speak From Within. So far, we have done the introduction and the first chapter called Expression. Today, it's going to be Chapter 2, titled Fear. Let's talk about fear. What happens when we're afraid? First, there are the physical sensations of fear. We sweat, our breathing intensifies, we might even pant. Our eyes might begin to dart around us. Our motions and movements become jerky, fast, and frantic. The butterflies in our stomachs launch into a jitterbug. Do those sound familiar? It's not surprising. Those are the very things the body does in order to prepare for a fight or flight response. Our heart beats faster, our cooling system jumps into action, our breath heaves fast into our lungs, so the muscles and blood become oxygenated and ready for action. We look around us to make sure we know what's going on, to ensure we know where the danger lies. We look for incongruities in our landscape. Are there hazards? Does everything seem okay? If not, we're ready for action. So if those are the precursors to a fight or flight response, why do so many of us report that those are the very symptoms we experience when we're about to speak in public? Take a minute right now and imagine you're about to speak in public. Really put yourself in that place. You are standing on a stage. Hot lights beam down on you, and hundreds of people are shuffling around and waiting for you to open your mouth and dazzle them with your brilliance. What is going through your mind? How do you feel? Many people report their breathing becomes shallow, their palms sweat, they hyperventilate, and their hearts pound in their ears. See? When we are in fight or flight mode and when we are nervous about speaking in public, we exhibit the exact same characteristics. We will get into why that happens later, but for right now, let's talk about what goes on inside us. In fight or flight mode, what happens to our thought processes and to our actions and reactions? The internal processes we go through in fight or flight are taking in all sorts of sensory information. That's why we might look around wildly. That frantic, look everywhere at once action lets us take in as much data as possible so that we can identify the danger. But our thoughts? Our thoughts tend to run to things like, what do I need to do? Where's the danger coming from? Am I safe? And that's the big question, isn't it? Am I safe? Now, in a dangerous situation, when we're actually facing hazards, it makes sense that our amygdala, the part of our brain that controls the fight or flight response, tries to sense danger. Our more intellectual side takes the data, deliberates on it, and then decides whether or not the danger is real. Then it determines how to respond. On the other hand, in a situation where we're about to speak in public, are we in danger? The last time you had to speak in public, were you in danger? Were you facing actual danger, or was it perceived danger? If so, what kind? What was actually causing the feeling of nervousness? Were you somehow unsafe? Were you about to die? Were you about to be hurt? Well, likely not physically, but emotionally? That's certainly possible. Our emotions are right below the surface when we speak in public, and they are easily bruised if we aren't prepared for the process. One of the reasons our emotions are so close to the surface is that in order to be an effective communicator, we have to establish a true, authentic connection to our audience. And as soon as our feelings are in play, we all exist in a more fragile state. The most fragile, of course, is the person who has the courage to stand up and communicate authentically with others. When you speak in public, you are the instrument. Further, you are playing your own composition. In fact, you are premiering it. Imagine you are Mozart or Beethoven. You have just written a concerto no one has heard before, and you're standing in front of a sold-out crowd. Some of them are your champions. Even though you were the one chosen to premiere your composition, many are here to listen to your wisdom, and you stand in front of them ready to premiere this particular bit of your soul. Is it any wonder some find this terrifying? What are some of the other dangers that might cause a fight or flight response? We could be in the middle of a battlefield. We could be facing an armed attacker. We could be caught in a natural disaster like a hurricane. Any of those dangers would be catastrophic, and we would have every right to be terrified, not just afraid. And yet, curiously, many people report the exact same reaction when they think about getting up in front of other people and speaking. Isn't that just amazing? The next part might be hard to read, but bear with me. I have a point. The causes of fear. What exactly is the worst that could happen if we stand up and talk to people? What might we lose? Will the sun blow up? Will a monsoon hit the building? If we compare the risks of public speaking to potential life-ending dangers, we can gain some perspective on this. Mind you, I'm not saying that your fears aren't real, and I'm not downplaying them. What I want to do is help you get a realistic perspective on what is happening inside yourself in those moments. What makes so many people terrified of putting it out there and having their say? If you are speaking in front of others, you might feel like you're on trial, or at least being scrutinized to within an inch of your life. But you know what? You aren't. Everyone has their own fears, thoughts, and feelings, and rarely are they about you. Even if someone has critical or negative things to say, their comments often reveal more about them than about you. Certainly, we can all improve our communication skills. I am a lifelong student of perception, communication, and presentation, and I still have a ton to learn. I believe I will be gaining insights until my dying day. But what anyone else believes about you and your skills can permeate only as far as you let it. Take the best, leave the rest. Let it become compost for another day. We could also think of that fear as a fear of not being seen. We could see it as the fear of derision or the terror that someone else gets to judge us, and not just what we say, but who we are. We feel dozens or hundreds of eyes on us, and we desperately wish to crawl into the nearest hole and disappear. That situation strikes at something deep, something primal within us. It sparks our survival instinct, but that instinct to get away, to survive at all cost, is not a conscious intellectual response. It's a reaction to fear, and it is hard to placate with anything less than running away. But what if we look at it another way? If we can get past that defense mechanism, if we can allay those fears, we can use that primal reaction to connect with everyone listening to us. Because here's the thing. We all know that fear to varying degrees. And if we all know it, we can all connect on that plane. If we can connect on that plane and accept that everyone else has felt some version of that fear before, then we know we're going through something we have all felt. Then we can all relax and know we are on the same page on that in-depth primal level, and we can move and grow through it to achieve connection and partnership with one another. And yes, since I know you're asking, I've been there too. I feel a strange sort of kinship with people who mispronounce words that they have clearly only seen written but never heard spoken before. For example, I just heard venture capitalist Chris Sacca interviewed on the Tim Ferriss Show. And if you want to check that out, it's tim.blog/2017/10/5/investing-wisdom, starting at 29 minutes and 54 seconds. And he pronounced the word amalgam as Amalgam. I gave him a long-distance high five because I've done the exact same thing many times. The first time, I was 8 years old. Mrs. Saperstein, my third-grade teacher, asked me to read an SRA, a Scholastic Reading Aptitude story, aloud to the class. English was still pretty new to me since I am an immigrant, but I was able to speak it pretty well, so I was game. I held the glossy piece of paper with the light blue border, and I read a short story about a hamlet in Switzerland in front of the class. As I read, I came upon the word picturesque, which I'd never seen before, much less heard, so I rendered the sentence as, nestled among the snowy hills, the hamlet was picturesque. I knew the word pictures, and I assumed Q was pronounced like the letter Q, which makes sense when you think about it. The class erupted. I was mortified, but didn't know why until the teacher explained. And ever since then, I celebrate these little moments of bravery. Sure, you might not know the word or have ever heard it before, but if you're daring, you plow ahead and either get it right or learn something. That moment left me terrified of speaking in public for years, but with time and perseverance, I overcame my fear. Just so you know, you don't have to pin your fear on one big precipitating event. It could be something or a series of somethings else, or you might just have an introverted or shy personality. There could be any number of reasons at the root of that fear. The key, I believe, is not to judge yourself for it. So we can take our bad experiences as harsh lessons that leave us too scared to speak up, like I did. Or we can change the narrative and use it as compost to grow something better. We can take a situation like mine and transform it into a victory. I didn't realize that I could change the story in my head until years later, by the way. Is it possible that those of you reading this can see that you can change your story too? I believe it is, and I believe you can. We all can. So, how do we do it? If you're one of the people who can trace your fear back to one precipitating event, I encourage you to go back and face it. Take a minute and remember that moment. Flesh it out for yourself. However, don't go back as you. Go back as an observer, like a fly on the wall, and review what happened. What made you feel this fear? Did someone laugh at you? Did someone insult you or bruise your feelings? Once you have it firmly in your mind, ask yourself if there was any good information for you at that moment. Were the people involved perhaps only acting out because they too were afraid? Was there a different set of factors contributing to their treatment of you? It's possible they were acting out their own fear and pain, and unfortunately, your feelings got caught in the crossfire. Take the time to forgive them and forgive yourself for your reaction. Perhaps we can all see the universality of pain around feeling like we deserve and have the right to express ourselves. Better still, we can forgive ourselves and each other. I encourage you to do it. If you do, then you can take that moment and moments like it and transform it into a challenge you can meet. The more each of us chooses to treat that unhappy moment like a learning experience, the more we will be able to connect with others, because we all know how it feels to be wrong in public, like I was when I pronounced the Q in picturesque. As I think about it, I realize it wasn't just that moment. I had other reasons to be afraid, too. My father physically, psychologically, and emotionally abused my sisters and me. He beat us for the most inane reasons. Once, it happened because I didn't want to sit in a chair my father had commanded I sit on. On another occasion, instead of straight A's on my report card, I brought home 5 A's and 1 A-. And on top of the abuse, we had to keep our mouths shut. We couldn't tell anyone what was happening for fear of further violence. This was the 1970s, and there weren't the resources we have today. When the police came to our house, all they did was tell us to keep it down. They never offered us any help beyond telling my father he needed to control his temper. I'm sure you know how well that worked. But what it did do was teach me to become as inconspicuous as possible, to keep my mouth shut and to protect my sisters as best I could. One of his tactics still haunts me. He would hold a piece of white paper in front of us. "I am your father," he would say. "If I say this piece of paper is black, you say, 'Yes, Dad, it's black.'" As you might imagine, my father's abuse damaged my ability to express myself. However, it never deadened my desire to speak my truth. Even if I couldn't say it to him, I found other ways to say it. I sang it. I spoke it on stage. I found ways to speak truth to power. I lucked into some great teachers who helped me break out of my shell. Not everyone has that outside support, so many of us shut up and shut down, close up, and stay that way. In the 90s, I volunteered with the Clothesline Project. Much like the AIDS quilt, this project was started in 1990 to shed light on violence against women. Women who had survived violence made and decorated shirts with their stories. Others made shirts for women who didn't survive. At one point, we brought the Clothesline Project to the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and as one of the organizers, I spoke at the exhibit. I told my story of the piece of white paper. I told everyone about how my father used to threaten our lives if we didn't agree with him that the white paper was black. As a child, I saved my own life when I said the paper was black. As an adult, I saved my spirit when I stood on the mall in front of hundreds of people and screamed, "Dad, that piece of paper was white." I hadn't needed to say it to his face, but I did need to say it. I needed to take that power from him and hold it in my own hands, and I did. That moment freed me, and I believe you can free yourself too. But what if you're not ready for a big psychological breakthrough right now? That's perfectly fine. Let's explore some practical tools you can use if you know you have to speak in front of people and you're just terrified. Bearing in mind that some of us have social anxiety that debilitates us to the point where we need medication or counseling. So if that's something you have a deep issue with, I encourage you to take care of yourself in the manner that works best for you. In my mind, that fear, that abject terror comes upon us because of one of two things. Either we feel like we're going to totally screw it up and look like complete idiots, or we feel judged before we even go out there to speak. Regardless, it is a fear response, and the best way to deal with those responses, I think, is to name them. You could name your fear response something like Murgatroyd or Aloysius or Gertrude, but do name it. Become friends with it. Go have a beer with it. Okay, I don't mean to go actually have a beer, but you might want to sit down and ask yourself some questions. Or rather, ask Aloysius or Murgatroyd or Gertrude some questions. Where have they come from? What is the worst they think could happen? And really listen to yourself for the answer, because that call is coming from inside the house. If you ask, you will find the reason why you're so terrified. And once you find it, you can deal with it. Okay, I'm going to stop reading chapter 2 right now because it turns out it's actually really long. So come back next time, next Thursday, and listen to the end of chapter 2 on this, the Innovative Mindset podcast. If you're enjoying the book, I'd love it if you'd let me know. I'd love to hear from you about it. I'm having a great time reading it to you. It's a subject that's really close to my heart because I feel like the more we are able to communicate, the more we're able to interact with one another from that authentic place of courage and conviction, the better off we all are, because then we can really understand each other. And when you understand someone, there's no way you can be indifferent to them. So I really encourage you to keep listening and to come on back every Thursday and listen to each chapter of Speak From Within. If you decide you want to read ahead, please feel free to get the book. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to isoldat.com and go into the About section, and there's a little subsection where you can see all my books. As always, I welcome your feedback. It would mean the world to me if you'd let me know what you're thinking, or if you want to review the show, that would be terrific too. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg reminding you to dream big and dare it all.